During the Hour of Joy, the toys revolted and killed everyone inside of the factory, whether they were guilty or innocent. But there was also something else going on that most people don't think about, and it's the fact that the prototype took the orphans and is now keeping them in the labs, which is also known as his home. So why is the prototype keeping the orphans so close to him? And if he's doing this, then are we even going to save the orphans in chapter 5? Well, we have to remember that most of the experiments were orphans. However, with the prototype, we honestly have zero idea, as he wasn't created like the other toys. For example, he has a digestive tract but has no need to eat food. Meanwhile, the other toys who say they were starving definitely do need to eat food. Cause when we see Doughy kill Pianosaurus, he says he hasn't eaten in weeks.
Now that hit the spot. I haven't eaten in weeks.
And when we make it to Safe Haven, almost all of the smaller toys are groaning, thinking that they're about to die.
Which will kill us first, you think? The doctor or hunger? I prefer not to even think about it.
So it's possible that not only is the prototype different in his biology, but it's also possible that he's not even an orphan and instead could be Elliot Ludwig. And the reason I say this is because of one of my past theories, which I'll leave linked down in the description. The quick version of the theory is that the prototype acts very weird around Poppy, almost as if he were her dad.
I'm disappointed.
After all that time in your case, I'd hoped you'd see things differently.
Don't you understand?
It's always been about you
And we'll harm you. What we are. That's not a truth that can be brought away. No. Not when it can mean so much more.
Prototype. Please.
It's time to come home.
Poppy.
It's time to come home.
And because of the untitled tape, we know that Elliot Ludwig is Poppy's dad. And if we connect the dots, then it's very possible that the prototype is Elliot Ludwig. But the important thing is, if the prototype is Elliot Ludwig, this gives us more information as to why he's keeping them down in the labs. Elliot Ludwig was a man who claimed to love children so much that he became the king of the toy industry and even built Playcare, their very own on-site orphanage, which was meant to be the happiest place on earth for orphans who had just lost their parents and were looking for a new home. And because we know that the prototype, or Elliot Ludwig in this theory, started the Hour of Joy, it's possible that he did all of this in order to save the orphans from being turned into an experiment just like he was. And we know for a fact that the prototype hated the employees and what they were doing with their experiments because of a chapter 3 tape where the prototype goes full psychopath mode and trying to scare Sawyer.
This question referred to what exactly?
You stick us,
Beat us.
tear up flesh.
Do you feel it?
But if this is the case, then the prototype definitely won't be willing to give up the orphans so easily and will genuinely have to fight to save them, which was part of Poppy's plan. However, I'm not exactly sure how that was going to work because we were supposed to take out the orphans and then explode the factory. But considering that Poppy was willing to kill all of the Safe Haven toys, it's possible that she'd be willing to kill everyone. So maybe it's a good thing that the prototype took the explosives away. But my next question is, what in the world does the prototype need the orphans for? Well, it seems that he wants to experiment on them, even though he hated Playtime Co. for the same exact reason. In the chapter 4 tape, we hear a conversation between Harley, Sawyer, and the prototype, where they're talking about something they're doing in the labs, which can only mean one thing. they're making more experiments. Because why else would the prototype keep Harley Sawyer alive? And if you remember back to the chapter 3 radios, during our hallucination, we hear of a story where Elliot Ludwig had the body of a dead child on his property after he passed away. So if the prototype is actually Ludwig, it wouldn't be out of character for him to do this. But when Poppy tells us that the orphans are in the labs, she also says that they're sleeping.
What I said on the elevator, it's true. The orphans weren't killed during the hour of Joey. They were taken. They're below, in the labs. The prototype's home. They are alive, but sleeping. They're with him.
So what does that mean? Because there is no way they've been sleeping for 10 straight years. I wish, bro. Well, the prototype might have them under the effects of the red smoke, where they're in some kind of cryogenic-like states where he can preserve them alive without using too much food on them. But then this adds more complications for us saving the orphans, because if they're all gonna be asleep, we literally have to carry them out of the labs, which would be insanely hard to do, and we could at most carry 1 or 2 very young kids out of there. So not only would we have to break into the labs, somehow avoid or maybe even kill the prototype, but also find a way to get them out of their sleep state and then lead them out even though they probably haven't walked in about 10 years. But there is one last thing that might give us an extra advantage in trying to lead out the orphans, and that is Kissy Missy. If she manages to survive the events of chapter 4 and make it into chapter 5, then she could help us in the labs and maybe even carry a few kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to walk. But sadly, there are 2 final obstacles in the way of us saving the orphans, and they're Huggy Wuggy and the prototype. The first problem being Huggy Wuggy, because if Kissy even wants to help us in the first place, we're gonna have to somehow get rid of him because he's literally right outside of the labs. But because they're both injured, I have zero idea which one would win in a fight, and honestly, if the prototype decided to help out Huggy Wuggy, then Kissy would be dead pretty quickly. But let's say that we managed to somehow take out Huggy Wuggy. How in the world are we gonna take out the prototype when this dude literally killed Catnap in 1 second? Well, it seems that with each chapter, the boss fights keep getting better and better, because in chapter 1 we had a somewhat short chase scene, and in chapter 2 we had a longer chase scene, but in chapters 3 and 4 we had some pretty interesting boss fights that made it a lot harder to actually finish the game. So in chapter 5 they could follow this trend and make a boss fight for the prototype, which would involve him free roaming similarly to how Doey was in chapter 4. And then after managing to defeat the prototype, we'd somehow have to take them out of their cryo state, and either by waiting for them to get back to normal or with the help of Kissy Missy, we could lead them all the way back and out of the factory. And although it'd be an insanely long journey, as long as the cable car to Playcare is still working, it should be fairly easy. But considering the fact that Mob has yet to use human NPCs, I kind of doubt that we'll save the orphans, and they might just have a different ending for us in chapter 5. Or it's possible that we might end up dying, but another character such as Kissy or maybe even Poppy will save the orphans off screen. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.